Today in Plant Coaster I finally get to build a ley line after talking about how important ley lines are for Vaddjian for, I think, since Vaddjian started. So I hope you enjoyed the video, and of course any feedback is greatly appreciated. And let's get into it, shall we? So today we start off in the caves that are after the first drop in the coaster, and these are the caves that the ley line is going to be in. Or at least in one of the caves it's going to be slightly visible, because the coaster just goes too fast to really spot it. It's like in the last episode where I was talking about the rock in the lake, where basically, to give you a quick explanation, a rock fell off the mountain, fell into the lake, and before it hit the lake floor it froze up, so now it's just like half in the water, half out of the water, just sticking out. And in the coaster you don't really see it because you go too fast to really see it. And the ley line is probably going to be in a similar fashion, because it's just, the coaster just goes too fast. But if I made the coaster any slower, first of all the ratings would drop. I like my coasters to still have good ratings, so making the coaster go any slower, then the coaster wouldn't be attractive to peeps. And if I made the coaster slower, it wouldn't really give the right feel that I wanted. It would feel a bit too slow to make it feel like you were flying through the air. And I don't want this to become a fast dark ride. But the idea with the caves and the ley line is that the birds or the hawks or whatever the birds are go through the caves, just quick warm up so that they don't become floating icicles when they are hunting. And that's basically also why they, I think, would go through those caves quite fast, because those caves are, well, quite warm. Also, those caves are a bit more tying into the basic nature part of Melandru. If you haven't watched the earlier episode, Melandru is the goddess of nature, growth and earth in Guild Wars 2, and I said in the earlier episode that I wanted to play more into the bit more harsher side of nature, you know, the struggle of survival for animals, and just actually a bit more like the strongest will survive. But I do wanted to give like little nooks and crevices where Melandru in another way shines. Though I don't expect these caves to be, well, livable for those animals like the birds, because they just would be too hot. Like in those caves the ley line is closer to the ground than in the town, and in some parts it's just completely open, like the ground is completely open and you can see the ley line, and there is like water going through the rocks and or snow, or yeah, just the place is warm, so there's going to be waterfalls, there's going to be a really tropical feeling to the caves, and then you go outside and then it's freezing cold again. Though when I made the caves I did want to make sure that in some way, because let's just say it, the caves are 90% rocks. Like in this coaster you will see me primarily placing down rocks, a lot of rocks. But I did try to make it seem that the rocks would shield out the freezing gusts of Vaddjian, so that there is a bit slight realistic feel to the caves, that they are a bit shielded from the cold from the outside, but maybe also in a way that the warmth of the cave doesn't really easily escape outside. Quick intermission between all the rambling. The town of Vaddjian will probably be built more in the background, because I didn't really think it was interesting for you guys to see every little building that I built. And also just because I wanted to give you guys some things left to uncover when Vaddjian is ever released, because that's going to take a long ass time. Anyway, that was all, back to the video. And now finally you get to see me build a ley line, which are basically just blue, well, I call them rivers, and in this coaster they look a bit like rivers because they are, well, they are on the ground, but they could also just be floating in the air. But I didn't want to make them floating in the air. Like, also ley lines aren't Most of the time they are not really visible, but yeah, to make a ley line and then, or at least talk about it a lot and then make it barely visible throughout the entire park, sometimes you have to change a few things to make them work in Plant Coaster. And even though the ley line again isn't really visible when you ride the coaster because the coaster goes too fast, it's still nice to, you know, make it appear. And yeah, the ley line is basically all these, what are they called, engine thrusters or something. They do look a bit like that in Guild Wars 2, but also not completely because they are a bit too visible actually. But if I made it any less visible, then it would just have been more easily to just not place them, because then the effect would be completely gone. Like you have 5 seconds or maybe even just 1 second in the coaster to see them. But if I made the ley lines any less visible and make them really like how they were in Guild Wars 2, then you would just stand no chance to find them. But yeah, to get back on the ley lines, they are really visible in the first cave that you go through, because there the ground is literally split open. There are actually floating rocks, because for some reason ley lines just like to make rocks float. This is also in Guild Wars 2 that the ley lines do make rocks float, and then I like the idea of it and I wanted to put it in there because, you know, the ground was split open, so there would be loose rocks that the ley line would just, I don't know why the ley line makes them float. I really don't understand why the ley line makes things float, but it does for some reason. But then ley lines are just raw magic channels. Yeah, they are channels of just raw magic, so you have really no idea what they would do. I think even in Guild Wars 2 there's not really a real easy way to say what the ley line does. It's magic. And in some ways it's fun. It's also fun to build the coaster, place all these rocks, and then find out that one seat of the coaster train is just clipping through all the rocks and all the trees and scenery and everything, because you have built so far and all that, and then you watch the POV and you're just like, yeah, I wanted survival of the strongest, but you stand no chance. So of course the rocks had to be adjusted quite a lot of times, nature had to be adjusted quite a lot of times. Well, water actually didn't have to be adjusted, because if you get wet, well, then actually it would be bad if the birds got wet, because they would go outside and they would immediately turn into frozen some birds. Now I keep thinking of birds falling down from the sky like giant ice blocks. Where was I going with this again? I don't know. But it is really weird actually, in a way that you don't really see like the palm trees and the tropical feel of the caves from the outside, because again they are shielded off by the rocks. But then it's really weird to go in there because it's such dramatic difference between the inside and the outside. But then it kind of works in the favor of Melandru, because yeah, nature is harsh, but again it can also be quite beautiful, and this coaster actually shows the really beautiful and almost really inviting way to show nature, but then it also shows the cold, harsh way of nature, of survival of the strongest or survival of the fittest. Nature is a cruel bastard. But the main idea behind the case was still the idea of hidden nature, as it were, of very secluded and isolated pockets of nature that still made you realize that even in the harsh, cold wasteland of Vaddjian, in some places nature still has the upper hand, or at least plants and life. Because the outside does have life, like there are still some things there, but it's not as boom in your face as it is in these caves. Also, I said earlier I didn't want the ley lines to float because, well, it's mainly because I always imagined the ley lines in Vaddjian to be below ground, and then for them to suddenly spike up in a cave, I just didn't feel that would be the right thing to do. So because the ley lines beneath Vaddjian or the town are lower than the ley lines here, I thought it was just alright. If it's going to float in here, then it's very high, then it's just too drastic of a change between the town and the mountain. Though I do think that this ley line is not like the main ley line, this is probably an offshoot. I do think like the main ley line or the main, well, hub of ley lines would probably be at the center, probably at the weenie. So that gives a lot of ideas on how I want to approach the weenie. It's still strange that the idea behind this whole coaster just started with those, well, sadly, those videos of birds taking off baby rabbits and such. That was literally the inspiration for this coaster. And it's very dark, very morbid, but still for me it gave me the idea to do this. I don't think it even was watching, I just reminded myself somehow of those videos. And then I made this weird coaster. Or at least it's not a weird coaster, the idea behind it is just a little bit strange. And I really wanted to know if you guys ever had such a moment where you had the most weird thought or something and that gave you an inspiration for a coaster. Have you guys ever thought just like, what the frick am I thinking? And why do I want to make a coaster out of this? Also, again, wanted to make something with this, so just made a nice river, just duplicating what I did with the frozen lake, and it looks like a checkerboard when the sun hits it right, but it's still, I think it's better than using the normal glass, because then it would look like a chessboard, because you can really see the lines in the glass from where the pieces connect, and it was more visible than the checkerboard. But I always want the cube to have some sort of interaction with the coaster, like even if the coaster is really bizarre, really out of whatever, which is probably going to be in one coaster I've already thought of for another goddess in the park, which is going to be a very weird coaster because she's a very weird goddess. But I always want there to be a connection with the coaster because I really like that. I've seen that in quite a lot of coasters that, you know, while in the queue, like the coaster goes on top of you and the coaster goes around you, and that's just, it makes you excited to go on the coaster because you just see all the people screaming their bloody voices completely broken, and then you just want to go in there. I don't know why. I don't know why I really like coasters, but sometimes they really make me question, like, we all ride coasters just for that like thrill of adrenaline. But then again, my first coaster was a coaster that didn't do anything. It was basically a simple 8. And then I was even freaked out by that. And I'm not going to say like, oh no, I was 5 or so. No, I was deadly afraid of coasters for a long time actually. I think I was 12, 13 maybe even, when I really got into coasters. And even then I was still deadly afraid of, well, the loop-de-loops. Like now I go on every coaster in the park that I get to. But back to the coaster we are actually building. I am really enjoying myself with the challenge of not adding a lot of plants, and if I'm adding plants then I need to follow the rules that they need to be protected from like blizzards, so they need to be in nooks and crannies of rocks. And that really just gives the way to a lot of shrubbery actually, not a lot of trees. And even if I use trees they need to be protected, so usually they are not. Well, this is the plains of Melandru. I'm not going to add a lot of mountains. So a lot of places are only going to have shrubbery. Though the dead trees, even though they look ominous in every other place, here they look very serene, how they're like slowly waving in the air. They look very calming and very elegant in a way. Anyways, I really wanted to take the time also to ask you guys how you think the coaster is turning out so far. Because I really like it, but I'm really curious about your opinion on it, and if you think I should change anything, let me know Every bit of feedback is always appreciated. And for the next video, it's going to be a bit different because I'm going to actually use a lot of plants and a lot of rocks and anything. But as I earlier mentioned, this is a bit more of the story of the hawk and the rabbit and how the rabbit gets plucked from the ground. And we have the hawk now, but we don't have the rabbit. So that will be the next video. I really hope you enjoyed the video. If you do, don't forget to subscribe, and I hope you have an amazing day, and I will see you in the next video. Bye bye!